chocolate chip oatmeal cookies are easy and delicious. I'm using a recipe from kingarthurflour.com. If you aren't familiar with King Arthur flour, it's a fairly famous brand of flour, and it also has a website, kingarthurflour.com. I'm actually surprised more people in the online cooking community don't talk about kingarthurflour.com because it is a really great resource with recipes and cooking tips. So if you aren't familiar with that site, go check it out. Like I said, this is their recipe, but I'm adding my own personal touches to it, and I'm using half of a recipe because I don't need a ton of cookies. I am using 1 stick of butter or 113 grams, half a cup of brown sugar, 106 grams as they measure. Originally the recipe calls for light brown sugar, but I'm using dark. A quarter cup of white sugar, 45 grams. 1 large egg. 1/2 teaspoon of vanilla. The original recipe calls for 1 tablespoon of vanilla, so I'm using half a teaspoon along with a little over 1 teaspoon of fresh lemon zest. I have an embarrassingly large number of lemons in my house. I've been meaning to make lemon recipes, but I just have not gotten around to that. So I'm going to use some of the zest. One thing that Argentines seem to like to do is combine citrus with chocolate. And I think in this recipe, it's going to work out really well. I did that in my chocolate chip cookies with pudding video I did last summer, and my friends who tried the recipe really liked it. So I'm going to do that again. And I think the citrus is going to go really well with the brown sugar as well. I'm using 1 cup of flour as they measure at 120 grams, along with half of a teaspoon each of salt, baking soda, and baking powder. And I'm going to add half a teaspoon of cinnamon. Argentine rice pudding combines lemon and cinnamon, and it's a really great combination. I don't see that much in the United States, but it's exceptional, and I think it's going to be really good in this recipe. I'm using half of a cup or 45 grams of old-fashioned oats. The recipe says old-fashioned or quick cooking. I like the texture of old-fashioned oats, so I'm going to use those. And then also, last but not least, the chocolate chips. I'm using semi-sweet chocolate chips. I'm only using 2/3 of a cup or about 155 grams. I like chocolate, but I feel like sometimes chocolate chip cookies have too many chocolate chips. So those are the ingredients. And I'm going to get started by creaming the butter and sugar. So this butter is softened. I'm going to add my sugar to this. I know it's not quite a bowl. I didn't want to dirty the big bowl because, like I said, I'm making half of a recipe. You could do this by hand, but I'm going to use my hand mixer. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to beat the butter and sugar together until they are creamed. I finished creaming my butter and sugar together. I had to go through like this and break up some of the little bits of brown sugar because it was a bit old, but I think it'll be fine. Now I'm going to add my 1 large egg along with the half a teaspoon of vanilla and my a little over 1 teaspoon of lemon zest. If you want to use lemon extract, then use half of a teaspoon, because the conversion of citrus zest to citrus extract is 1 teaspoon of extract is equal to 2 teaspoons of zest. So you add double the amount of zest as extract. The extract is very concentrated. And even though I'm using lemon, I think orange would be good in this as well. I'm just going to blend this together, and then I will bring you back. Now that all of my wet ingredients for my chocolate chip oatmeal cookies are combined, it's time to move on to the dry. As you can see, I mixed together all of the flour, cinnamon, salt, baking powder, and baking soda. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add the flour and the oats a little bit at a time so that I don't get covered in a cloud of flour. See, just like that, a little bit at a time. I finished adding the oats and the flour. I tasted it in spite of the raw egg, and it's absolutely delicious. I think the cinnamon, the brown sugar, the vanilla, and the lemon, everything comes together to make something that's incredibly flavorful. Now for the chocolate chips. I was doing some research on this recipe, and John Kanell of Preppy Kitchen, he has a recipe for this, for these chocolate chip oatmeal cookies, and he had a good idea. Don't add all the chocolate chips to the batter. Leave some out, and then when you put the cookies on the cookie sheet, add a few more on the top, because a lot of the time the chocolate chips will get lost in the batter, and when it comes time to eat them and present them, there aren't any chocolate chips on the surface. So I think that's a good idea. I'm going to add most. I'll leave a few off to the side, and I will stick those on when I bake them. Now it's time to bake the cookies. My oven is preheated to 325 degrees Fahrenheit. Most cookies are baked at 350, sometimes 375, so that's something to pay attention to. I'm using my pizza pan. I sprayed it with canola oil, and I am shaping the cookies like this. I am scooping them up in this teaspoon. This is probably actually a tablespoon, so if you want to use a tablespoon measurement, go right on ahead, but I don't want to dirty something else. So I am just going to do this. A very generous teaspoon is actually probably a tablespoon. And I'm going to shape these a little bit. The recipe does not call for chilling the dough, but a lot of cookie recipes have you chill the dough for about half an hour so that the flavors have time to come together, and I think the cookies will probably hold their shape a bit better, but I don't have time for that today. I said I was going to add some cookies on the top, or excuse me, some chocolate chips on the top, but honestly, I think this looks okay, so I'll let you know how many chocolate chips I didn't add. Maybe just half of a cup of chocolate chips would be fine. Like I said, I like chocolate, but I think some chocolate chip cookies have too many chocolate chips. And these are so flavorful with all the other things. I don't want to cover all the other flavors with chocolate. So these are going to go in the oven. It says 325 for 12 to 17 minutes. I'll let you know. I just took my chocolate chip oatmeal cookies out of the oven. They were in at 325 for 12 minutes. The dough is not chilled. And as you can see, they're turning brown around the edges, but the middle, that still looks kind of underdone. You can see some bubbles. It looks a bit wet, like right here, it looks a bit wet. That's what you want if you want them to be chewy. If you want them to be crispy and snap, leave them in longer. But if you want them to be soft on the inside, let them sit on the cookie sheet. Take them out of the oven when you think they're kind of underdone still. Let them sit on the cookie sheet for 5 minutes. and then transfer them to a cool cookie sheet or wire rack to cool completely. This is the second batch of chocolate chip oatmeal cookies. They just came out of the oven. They were in, once again, at 325 Fahrenheit for 12 minutes. This time I chilled the dough while the first batch was in the oven, and I may have made the cookies a little bit bigger as well, but it looks like they're slightly more underdone in the middle. So as you can see, chilling the dough does seem to have a little bit of an effect. With these last few cookies, I'm baking them from frozen. Let's see how they turn out. These are the cookies that I baked from frozen. As would be expected, they seem to not have browned quite as much. But we will see how they turn out. My chocolate chip oatmeal cookies are now done. They are delicious and they look very nice as well. There's a hint of lemon, a hint of cinnamon, nice texture from the oatmeal. Very, very nice. I have 22 cookies. I know they're not all the same size, but plan for 20 to 22 cookies. One thing I did want to point out is that I know that my cookies spread a bit, so if you want to get them apart, when you're taking them off the cookie sheet, take a sharp knife and go down like that. And then they will break apart without falling apart. Really, there were about 3 or 4 that didn't survive fully, but that's okay. Like you saw, the first batch, I did not refrigerate the dough at all. The second batch, I refrigerated it for 10 minutes. And then the last batch, I actually froze the dough. And there really wasn't much of a difference, I felt like. I'll see if I can include a picture or video of the different cookies, but honestly, I felt like there really wasn't that big of a difference in how they turned out. Oh, let's see if I can do it. See, they look fantastic. I'm going to break one apart. I'll do this one. And even though they are thin, they're crispy on the outside, but look, they're still chewy on the inside. So they're really nice texture. I ended up using about 125 grams of chocolate chips in total, so half of a cup. I honestly think that this is a good amount of chocolate. I think any more than this and there would be too much chocolate, especially since there are other flavors in there and you want to experience them as well. If you want to get a little bit of chocolate in every bite, maybe use mini chocolate chips instead of the normal size. But yeah, these turned out really well. You can see they're a thin, crispy cookie. They're really not thick. If that's what you're looking for, you might want to try a different recipe, but I'm definitely pleased with these. So thanks for watching. I hope you try this recipe. I'm sure you will love it. See you next time. Bye.